Okay, but it's time to start. So, what are IETF today? So we'll try to be IETF meeting. So the note well, all of you. Please move forward, I think, without. The summary of the discussion or action points to do. I think that we won't really need to use orderly. I think that you can just go ahead and send audio and video when you let us know to we so that and during mostly in the security area, which was his main area of expertise. daytime job. This was just one of his passions, and he did it selflessly with no rewards in mind, just for the good of the IETF. Jim was very patient and helped a lot of people, me including for this working group. In fact, Jim agreed to co-chair Cbor in March 2019. He has helped progress a lot of our working group documents, participation and great reviews of almost, if not all of our documents, have been instrumental to progress all the documents in this working group. So I'd like for you to join me and take a moment of silence. Okay, let's continue. Back to thank you, Mike, and congratulations to working group. RFC 8949. Or Carsten, you want to say something?
Yes. So I have some slides for that. So we are at agenda building right now, right? So
Working group status update. So you can take.
okay, so I have slides for the next three segments here. So let's talk about 8949 to be for the moment. That's also known as 7049 bis. So it's the revised edition of the RFC for Cbor from September 2013. So we had some 7 years of time to learn about interoperability issues and fixing things and errata and so on. So that work left this working group IETF after last IETF, if I remember correctly. And we're currently in Auth 48, and it's not a short document. So we actually got 24 questions from the RFC editor. And it took us a while to actually answer all these questions. I finally generated a draft version of the answers yesterday, and my co-author has promised to look at them tomorrow. They're really doing their job. It's really amazing what level of detail they have there. A number of issues are really about XML to RFC, which is maybe not too surprising because it's a document with which is using a lot of features of XML to RFC, and there are situations where we have problematic text fallback. So let's quickly go through maybe 5 of the more interesting questions, or 6. First of all, we updated the reference to C++20. Now, why is C++20 of interest? Just because they finally got rid of one unnecessary variation that was allowed by earlier C and C++ documents. So we can simply point to C++20 and say, when you read our pseudocode, assume that the C++20 rules apply. So sign shifts work and conversions between signed and unsigned work in the way you would expect them. You have expected them to work for about 35 years now. And we managed to put in a reference without a paywall. So you can find, if you really need the C++ standard, all 1,300 pages of it, you can now find it from the document. The next few are really about things that we want to get right in the HTML and PDF version, but that cause problematic text fallbacks. So exponentiation is something we now can do with superscript formatting. And yeah, that's great. But the fallback for plain text RFCs is using a caret. And that actually means XOR in this specification. So we generated some text that explains this unfortunate reality, and people will have to live with that if that change is accepted. And similar things happen with monospace. We would like to write some things in monospace, in typewriter font, for instance, things that happen in the diagnostic notation. But the problem is the text fallback from monospace uses double quotes. So in the text version, it looks like we are notating a string and not reserved word from the diagnostic notation. So this is really confusing. So we went through the document and decided where that confusion is big enough to avoid us doing typewriter and where it doesn't. And we also use more italics where also the text fallback is not great, but that doesn't cause misunderstandings. So this is the kind of problem we are grappling with right now. Or for instance, there are now artwork and source code, and it never has been defined where exactly the boundary between the two is, and so on. And finally, as you know, we have a limited repertoire in RFCs, and so we have to do some weird things and can't have proper minus signs, and so we always have a hyphen where a minus sign would be needed, which can be very confusing in the math that is in the document. Anyway, we are finding solutions for all of those, and if you look into the repo for Cbor, then you find a draft reply to the RFC editor that my co-author will revise, and then we will probably send it off over the weekend. While working on this, we found one little oopsie. So you probably have heard all this discussion about unsigned versus negative, and we actually missed one of them because big nums usually are replaced by actual basic integers when they are small, including when they are 0. We never got around to actually replacing positive big nums by unsigned big nums, and that's a change that we are now proposing, because it's not the preferred serialization to have a big num with a value 0, but it is possible, and we should make sure that the statements in the document are true. So all this is in the draft RFC ed questions in the Cbor repository, and if you care about editorial details, please have a look there, and I'm sure we will have 2 or 3 more iterations with the RFC editor getting all of these details right, but again, they are really doing great work there. So as I said, we expect to be finished with the question answering in a couple of days. We probably need another week to do the full reread that is recommended. So that will probably be done on Black Friday, or what's it called, something Monday. And of course, again, you are invited to help and do your own full reread. Cyber Monday, thank you, Mohit. We should be able to finish OS 48 by the end of the month. That's a prediction, not a promise, but I think we have good timing. And just generally, I'm currently impressed by the RFC editor velocity. They're really doing good work. So the document entered the RFC editor queue 50 days ago. And we are already in auth 48. We already have been in auth 48 for a week. So yeah, this looks good. Any comments on that? Okay, in which case I will go to the next item. We had a working class call on the Cbor tags for OIDS document, and I have submitted a new version that addresses, I think, 2 of the issues and doesn't address a 3rd issue that came up, and we need to decide what to do now. So one of the comments was to actually add a 3rd tag, which I have provisionally called TBD 112. If you know ASCII, 112 is the ASCII character P. There was a comment that we probably should do something about IANA private enterprise numbers. And those actually occur so often in non-IETF documents I have been involved with that I think this is really a great idea. And structurally, this looks like a relative OID. So like TBD 110, but it is understood to be relative to 136141, which is the base OID of IANA private enterprise numbers. So the tag content will be 1 or 2, maybe 3 numbers in OID encoded form, in SDNV form, and that allows you to have a compact enterprise ID. So that's one big change, but I think it was not particularly difficult to do. Then it was suggested to have CDDL type names. So the prelude in RFC 7049 is designed to never change, so we cannot change the prelude here, but we can simply suggest CDDL type names that people could include in their specifications so that everybody uses the same type names for them. And those are OID, ROID, and PEN. I'm still looking for a reason to have a type name droid, but I didn't find one, so we are stuck with ROID. Then a question came up, do we maybe need more CDDL support for stripping away a prefix? Something is really weird about selecting things today. This would be essentially an inverse to the .cat that we have over in the control CDDL control draft. And so here's an example. The SHA-2 OID is essentially a prefix to the SHA-256 OID. And maybe if you do something where you are only talking about SHA-2s, you might just want to do the relative OID, the red stuff here. And it would be good to be able to say that in the CDDL. But if you look more closely, this is really just prefix removal in byte strings. So there's nothing specific to OIDs going on there. So addressing this issue in this document might miss a few requirements we have for this control operator in other applications. So my proposal would be to not address issue 3 here in this document, but to move it over to the CDL control document and add something there that is like .cat, just the other way around. So it's not adding something to a string, it's removing something from a string. So that's pretty much, I think, what we needed to do, and this is now in 03. And so the next question is, of course, are we ready for shipping this to the ISG? Hank.
Go ahead.
Yes, hi Carsten, hi everyone. Yeah, I love it. I was aware of it and I still love it. And I think it's very useful, as Carsten said. I think that the removal of prefixes is everything in namespaces might need that. And of course, beyond namespaces. So CDL-wise, I think that's the CDL thing, yes. And it's somehow the, I don't know, inverse of cut, I guess. So yeah, I'm happy with not having the CDL in here. We can ship it as is to ISG with the context as is without the CDL, I think. Would that be fine?
Great.
Excellent.
So there is some discussion in the chat about maybe calling something Droid, but I'm sure this is just in jest and not a serious suggestion. Okay. So okay, so I gather you will be the shepherd for that? Okay. Okay, so let's talk about the big project we have right now. A while ago, we finally got back the packed Cbor idea that actually had been in one of the early drafts of the 2013 RFC, but we took it out because it was too much complexity, and I think we were right, because now looking at it in detail, yes, indeed, there is a little bit more complexity than I thought in 2013. So basically, we know that Cbor is more efficient than JSON in most cases, but you only get really good Cbor efficiency if the data model is specifically designed for Cbor. And if you just encode JSON data in Cbor, then you still get much of the redundancy that is in JSON documents. And that redundancy, of course, can be removed by running deflate over the encoded data item. But that means that whoever wants to use the data item has to decompress it before using it. And that may be something that a constrained node doesn't want to do, and maybe also a high performance node doesn't want to do. So the alternative idea, which is not a replacement for compression, but just something that's better than compression in many cases, is to use Cbor itself to do structure and prefix sharing. Actually, should be saying FX sharing now, by packing. So a packed Cbor item can be used while remaining packed. So you don't have to unpack it to use it. It just becomes slightly more contorted to actually get at the data, but it's not a big difference from using an unpacked item. So that's the background, and we had a -00 and a lot of discussions, and in the last interim where we discussed this, we decided to have a good separation between the setup of the compression tables and the actual table referencing. So the table referencing engine, which is what really needs to run when you operate on a packed Cbor structure, that might be the same, even if there are good reasons to maybe have 2 or 3 different ways of doing the table setup, depending on what problem is exactly being solved. The other thing we decided to actually was to actually look at suffix sharing as well. So we now have the item sharing, where we are sharing a whole item, like a JSON key that occurs multiply, or even a whole substructure that occurs multiply. And then we have prefix sharing and suffix sharing, which is sharing of prefixes or suffixes of strings, but also of arrays and even of maps. So you can do a lot of compression, a lot of very concise representation if you have all 3 at your disposal. These different tables are in turn structured into buckets, because you only can have so many single byte or double byte reference into the tables. So we essentially have 4 efficiency buckets, or in some of them only 3. It doesn't make a difference whether the table setup restructures things within the buckets, but when something is pushed over into the next bucket, the efficiency goes down. So that's something that should not happen lightly. There are 3 inputs we discussed for table setup. One, of course, is within the packed item itself. There may be something imported from the surrounding data item. I think that's an interesting idea. I haven't really seen a good use case for that, but I could imagine that. So when I started packed, I kind of thought we would always pack entire data items, but since Cbor data items are mixed and matched and so on, maybe it's actually good to be able to carry a packed data item inside another data item that we then also want to pack. The third thing is static dictionaries, which are dictionaries that are outside the packed Cbor and that are known to the implementation that is using the packed Cbor in some way. I'll come to that in the next slide. Since there are multiple potential inputs, and in particular, if you're using a dictionary, in most cases, you actually want to have a local table input as well. There needs to be a combining rule, and the combining rule would be to put the things into the buckets they had been in, but when these buckets overflow, then you would simply overflow to the end of the next less efficient bucket. This shouldn't say table, it should say bucket. Okay, so that sounds good on a napkin, but I haven't been able to actually write this up in a reasonable way for this meeting, and I apologize for that. So just a reminder what these buckets were about. For instance, item references to shared items. There we have 16 simple values we propose to allocate, and 1 single byte tag that gives us, depending on the length of the argument, 48, 512, and 131,072, 1 plus 1, 1 plus 2, and 1 plus 4 buckets. And similarly, prefix references have various buckets. So the point here is that very small documents probably can get by with just the very efficient buckets. So you get a lot of compression, and very large documents probably have some items in there that are used a lot, and they also benefit from the more efficient buckets. But then we don't want to have artificial limitations, and that's why these numbers are so ridiculously large. So a compression algorithm doesn't have to worry about running out of space in the buckets. The remaining question, if this overflow stuff somehow works, which I was hand-waving about, the remaining question is, how do we actually reference dictionaries? The idea here is to separate the referencing and the table building scheme very clearly from the actual packing and referencing scheme to the data items. So actually the dictionary mechanism could even be application specific. So you could have something like in a suit manifest where it's just clear from the context where the dictionaries are. So you don't even have to encode anything. Just the fact that you're using a packed data structure within a manifest already tells you how the tables for that are set up. So I think there is a clear benefit in having that separation. And of course, if we want to export these application-specific parts into other environments, we could even define Cbor tags for the various ways of doing these things. Anyway, the actual reference could be a URI, which is great because it identifies something and locates something. Obviously, there are security considerations whenever we reference something. So in many cases, this will be the secure URI. Or we could use hashes. There are also URIs with hashes, RFC 6920. So maybe we want to unify that mechanism a little bit, but that is to be discussed. And third, there may be IANA registered dictionaries. These could be great because the IANA reference could be very compact. So the whole dictionary reference could be a single tag that has been registered. And the tag implies a certain dictionary, which of course is immutable. With the registration of the tag, you would define this dictionary once and for all. But this gives you a very inexpensive way to pull in a dictionary, so you don't have a 10-byte URI. At least, well, the 10-byte URI is actually already very compact, or a 16-byte hash, but you might have a 2 or 3 byte tag. So yeah, there may be other application-specific ways, but then the whole referencing scheme needs to be application-specific. So I think these are the three that are going to be in the batteries included version of Cbor packed. What I didn't write in this on this slide is that, of course, we need to define a format for these dictionaries at some point, but that probably could be very similar to the format we use for local table input. So that probably isn't too hard. So how do we build the Dasher-1 with all that? Well, first of all, given that we now also want to support suffixes, we will need to reserve even more tag space. And we probably need a quick reality check. For instance, what is the relative importance of prefix and suffix referencing? And have a reality check how much of the tag space we actually consume here. I would assume that a lot of Cbor data items in the future will use this, so it's quite okay to be to not be too frugal about them, but we also don't want to use half the space or something like that. So that's one decision that doesn't have a right or wrong answer that we have to take in the process. The referencing part itself is, I think, well defined, and again, maybe we want to split that out, and we could do one or more table setup schemes, and we could do a simple one first, but making sure that this is an extension point. So when people come up with other table setup schemes that solve their specific application, we don't get a problem with that. And in that context, we would attack external dictionaries and probably also have more than one scheme. And in that process, it's probably a good idea to split the draft. It's not quite clear where the right delimitation is, whether we put the simple table setup scheme right into the document that also defines the referencing. So that would be a batteries included version. You can go ahead and use that right away. Or whether we give ourselves different timelines for the two. So that's where we are with this. Any comments?
Thanks, Karsten. Comments, questions, welcome. Opinions about splitting the draft or not?
Yeah, I would really be interested in hearing on the list ideas where people think that this packing scheme actually might be beneficial. Most of the push to do this now came from the suit working group, but we are too late for that. So they will be finished before we are finished. So they will do something specific to suit. But I'm sure that there are other cases where this kind of functionality is quite useful, and it would be good to hear about those cases and what specific requirements these cases might have.
Just an answer. A Coral comes to mind, of course.
Yes.
Hank, go ahead.
Sure. Hi. This is Hank. We coming from the REDS space a little bit. There is this indeterministic chaos when a tester boots up and things are not in a deterministic sequence anymore. Entropy hits, and then you need logs. One corner, or basically a very prominent case, is that you create hashes for all software components before executions on a typical, I don't know, work desktop station. That's quite a lot of files, and all these files are on a file system. All these then have file paths. These paths could be segregated and packed. It's an implicit doubling of a lot of these items. There are structures like CoSwit that recreate the file tree structure to avoid this problem. If there could be a native thing that is enabling this packing for a lot of similar looking path sequences here, so sequences of path names, that would be nice, because that is a common thing in the software asset management world.
So this would be mostly prefix sharing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But everybody is talking about that. People talk about JSON encoding because human readable, and it will be a string in any way, because also Cbor does not provide a big benefit if you convey 10,000 actual file paths, file system paths. And then that again, yeah, that is a relatively straightforward thing here, I think.
Thank you, Hank. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, so I've seen some interest in having some more efficient Cbor formats for even just fairly ordinary REST APIs. any things that might be going back and forth using JSON today, and they want a simple way to have an option where clients can use the accept mechanism in HTTP to negotiate a perhaps less human readable but more efficient format. Obviously, there are trade-offs with deflate and all of those things that you've already covered, but there's definitely interest in this. And so in terms of what this needs to be able to do, is it is going to be important to be able to negotiate what kind of Cbor we're talking in those MIME types. And so that's part of the problem that particular space has to solve.
So would these imply the use of predefined static dictionaries, or would this all be local information?
Well, so predefined static dictionaries is actually one of the things that would be difficult to handle with a MIME type, for example, right?
Yes.
If all of the information is encoded directly in the object, then all we need to know is that packed Cbor is part of the standard, or part of the negotiation, right? Because just because I say I can accept Cbor doesn't mean I necessarily understand packed Cbor extensions.
Well, you could do something like the profile parameter in HTML that never took off to identify the static dictionary that you are using. So that's easy in the text MIME type. Then when you think about a co-op solution, you need a content format identifier for each of them. So there's another thing you need to register to make that happen. But in many cases, it will just be more expedient to have the data in there once, and instead of repeated all over the place.
Or possibly using the external dictionary mechanism that you suggested as well.
Yeah, so when we did something similar for the SIP protocol some 20 years ago, we decided that we could define an application-independent static dictionary. And that has been updated once, I think, so that there are now 2 versions of that dictionary. And that was good enough for the strings that typically occur in SIP. So there may be environments where such an application-independent static dictionary actually makes sense.
Right, and I think this has multiple use cases, but you're asking about specific examples, and so
yes,
that's certainly one space that I've seen some interest in.
Yeah, we probably need some text about use cases in the document, so people will know which of those various variants they should apply, and we should probably also need them to filter the variants, so we don't create a monster with thousands of different configurations that don't interoperate.
That sounds like a good idea. Opinion: split the draft, ship the batteries included version with solve external.
That sounds good to me. Yes. Yeah, there are quite a few documents that we actually should be picking up. Again, like the time tag, which is registered, so people can use it, but we probably want to spend the effort to turn this into a more complete RFC at some point. And I think when we are done with the current slate, we really should have one round through the community. What are they working on? So, for instance, the Haskell people have made a suggestion. They actually have type choices in Haskell, which are not pure type unions. But in encoding, you actually encode which of the branches of the type choice you have taken. And they need a couple of tags and probably hundreds or thousands of tags to be able to represent this for arbitrarily complex data. And things like that are coming up all the time, and I think we need to get better in picking them up. And so don't be surprised if I carry some of these to the working group in the next couple of months.
That sounds good. I was just checking the status of the time tag document, and it's expired right now.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't realize it had expired.
Yeah, so I think some of the authors are in this meeting. We could make an action item to revive it and to see what really are the things that we want to do. It started out as a kitchen sink version. It turned into a very minimal version, and the truth is probably in between.
Documents that is
Yes.
we haven't talked about today, and it's not yeah.
Yes, so that is actually being used in the ASDF working group, and there was a tiny extension to the dot feature mechanism that I put into the most recent draft. I forget what the number was. And we just discussed maybe doing something around the .cat, which, by the way, is now implemented together with .plus. And the third area where we do not have an implementation yet is the ABNF part. And I would expect once that is implemented, and a Christmas tree is a great environment to implement this, we should be able to push that one forward as well.
Unmute. Okay, thanks for the update, Karsten. So is there anybody who has any comment or anything they want to bring up? Any of these documents, really? Now will be the time. Otherwise, the mailing list is a very good place to bring up comments, just as a reminder. I also want to take a second and talk about the interims, because we are having interims. Not a lot of people have time to join every other week, and I would really recommend it 1 hour. At 5 p.m. Central European Time. Yeah.
day of the week was that?
Sorry?
Which day of the week was that?
Sorry, yeah, I didn't say it. About it. Yeah, but I was also thinking maybe to move it 1 hour earlier. But I don't know if that's a problem for participants. So that would be like
Yes, for me, it would be a standing with a core SAE security. Well, unless you went to the opposite week. It's crazy either.
but
I'm sorry. I spoke too quietly. It would be a collision with one of the two main SAE vehicle security calls. And means I need to be there. So that would be a good time.
okay, but
They are every 2 weeks, so we might be able to work around it. And I need to look at what's at the opposite. I think something just. I'll do that.
and yes, the interim I was thinking would resume.
Particular reason that it was useful to you to move it an hour earlier?
If I was going to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
Just
Because it wasn't so late in the afternoon in Central European time.
Yeah, for some of us, 5 p.m. is the time where we start commuting home and maybe continue working from there. So, yeah, but I think in the end, the compromise between West Coast USA and Europe calls for 1700 CET or 1600 world time. Do you want to continue this discussion? Because I have one other point.
I mean,
Yeah, I was just going to make a suggestion for the agenda. I think on the agenda there should be a regular item where we look at how Cbor has been picked up by other SDOs. And as far as I can see, the driving license, the mobile driving license application is now in ISO IEC DIS stage, which means it's technically stable. And Cbor is in there, and I think other components that from the IETF are in there. And I think it would be good for us to actually watch this and learn about how Cbor is used by other people. I think they also use CDDL. So I think they really have taken the whole package. Is anybody here familiar with ISO 18013-5? Okay, Mike Jones might have been, but he's not there today. Okay.
I'm waiting to see if nobody else wants to come to the mic and say something. Okay, then I guess we can close the meeting today, 5 minutes early. And have a good rest of the week. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye all.